as usual, Gary speaking straight from the hip. Can you understand why Harry Redknapp was upset, Mark?
Absolutely. I thought he was way over the top. I mean, maybe at times the perception may have been that they could have been soft in some games, and maybe from a Manchester United perspective, maybe when you're talking about the time that Gary Neville played for Manchester United and the way they dominated the league, the way they actually at times dominated Tottenham, maybe that's maybe how his perception has come across. But I think to say that they were rubbish, soft and spineless, I think that's way over the top. And gutless.
I think very disrespectful. And I've only seen that. I've read coming down here today about lots of stuff going on social media, and you're thinking, OK, look, now I've seen it, I think it's over the top, big time.
Well, Harry, of course, was the manager between 2008 and 2012 at White Hart Lane. He clearly wasn't happy, and his response was he found it very... Well, he said, I thought Gary's comments were an absolute disgrace. I can only comment on the 3.5 years I managed the club, and we weren't gutless, we weren't spineless, we weren't pathetic. You know, he really was not happy or not. Flaky,
I get the flaky.
Flaky or soft.
I get the flaky bit, and I guess that maybe the...
But what interests me here, Steve, sorry to cut across you, it's not the disagreement between... I mean, Harry's more than entitled to stand up for himself, and Gary's entitled to have his opinion. But today, one or two Spurs fans have said, well, actually, I think Gary had a point. In the old days, we were. Because Gary's actually trying to pay Spurs a compliment right now, under Pochettino, saying they're no longer that sort of team. I think what Harry has said is, well, hang on, if you have a look at them under the me, I don't think you could accuse any of those players of being that.
Yeah, I mean, the time that I've been in England, since 1996, I haven't seen a spineless, soft, flaky, rubbish Spurs side. I mean, you could argue and say that at times, every team, you could look at every team and say, they lost games, they threw games away in winning positions. I remember the game at White Hart Lane when they lost to Manchester United being 2-0 up. Everyone's gone through games like that. But to actually say in the last 30 years, that's how they've been, I can't see it. I don't know where that's come from, other than his perspective being a Manchester United player playing against Tottenham. Maybe that's how their perception was.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out in the next few days and maybe coming weeks, of players and managers who have sent teams out to play against Gary Neville and said, get at Neville, he can't run. This guy can't run, he can't defend, because that's what will happen now. And no wonder Harry has said, and this is where he's got a monkey on his back with Valencia. So he's tough talking, fine, and I do like the way he talks, and fair play to him. But sometimes you've got to reel it in a little bit, because the Valencia thing will come back to bite him, big time, and it already is.
Listen, Gary's more than well aware of that, yes. and he can handle that. I think, again, the wider picture with Tottenham and the perception of, if you weren't using words as strong as that, the fact that the lack of trophies and the not quite getting there has added to the perception in some parts that pre-Poch, and certainly pre-Harry, because the stats back it up, they didn't see the job through.
Well, that's quite right. There's a lot of teams who've been flaky and a soft underbelly and southern softies, the way sometimes we used to say it, because obviously northern clubs used to go south and say these southern softies, but not gutless and spineless. That is... It's bad in just the fact that you're disrespecting the players who played. Some top players played for Tottenham. He weren't gutless and spineless. And he says over a 30-year period.
Where they won trophies.
When he won trophies.
When they haven't won trophies now. Yeah. So it's sort of contradicting itself as well, really, because there was a period of that time in the last 30 years where they've won trophies. They've won major trophies, and whereas in the last couple of years they've failed to do so. But I agree. I mean, they are a very tough, resilient, robust side now, and one of the best Spurs sides I've ever seen or come up against. But
as a team, they are. As a package, the 11 are very difficult to play against and a top team. Individually, I mean, Tottenham had some world-class players. Yeah. World-class players. I can see where Harry's coming from, but I can see where Gary's coming from. But I think it was a bit harsh with the spineless and gutless. I think that in itself is damning, pretty damning. And if I'm Harry, I'm saying, yeah, good on you. You've got a right to be disappointed in what an ex-pro has said about basically you. He's pointing a finger at Harry and his tactics and how he got the best out of, or didn't get the best out of the players.
I don't think he'll be the first Tottenham manager or the last one to come out in this period now to defend their teams.
Well, all managers and players are proud of their team and of their performances as well. The strange thing in this scenario was how much this was supposed to be a compliment to what we're seeing at Tottenham right now. And many people would agree that they now have a newfound resilience and a newfound steel to them.
Well,
that perhaps.
Well, if Gary says the way you've just said it, then everybody say, yeah, got a point. Point made and well made. And say they're flaky and they haven't been a team and they haven't been all together at certain times. They've had wonderful individual players over a period of time, but they haven't had a togetherness. Now, that is where you'd go, and Harry would probably say, well, he might have a point.
Are those terms, even if you find, if they're acceptable, they're bandied around when things like, basically when a team underperforms. The year that Leicester won the title, and it was literally Leicester, Tottenham, neck and neck, and they finished third.
Yeah, I mean,
does that make them a target for those sort of?
But he's not even referring to them then, is he? He's talking about prior to that. So, I mean, you could argue and say that was a time when, if Tottenham were going to win the league, that was the year. But they came up against a Leicester side that, had less pressure on them, really. I mean, because everyone was expecting them to fall away, and everyone expecting them, Tottenham at the very least, to be the best of the next lot, the so-called big guns that were supposed to be winning the league. So that was the season where they missed out. It got away from them, and that's where you could look at it and go, actually, that's where they rolled over at times. The game at Chelsea, when they were up 2-0 and end up dropping down to 2-2.
I think there was a game where United played Tottenham. They were losing 2-0 and won 5-2, I think, in the end. So I think maybe he's referring for that particular game. Now, I don't know of any manager, certainly Harry Redknapp wouldn't have gone into any of his sides and said, you're spineless, you're gutless, you're rubbish, because you wouldn't get away with it nowadays. I don't think any manager would be able to go into a dressing room and say that to his players, because you'd lose them. Completely and utterly lose them. And I get half of what Gary said, but certainly not the end bit, when he's very passionate by saying pathetic and spineless and gutless. And he said it with a passion as well.
I mean, if you're talking about isolated games,
yes,
then maybe you can look at every single team and every single club and say the same thing.
Over 30 years.
Exactly, and that's where I think he's wrong.